so we've got a really interesting set of research here, all about geopolitical risk,
Mm.
but with a bit of a twist.
Yeah.
It's not just about, like, wars and treaties and stuff. It actually looks at how geopolitical risk, all those global tensions,
Right.
could be affecting the environment.
Yeah.
And even public health. Like, whoa.
It's pretty fascinating, yeah.
I know. So before we, dive into all the details,
Okay.
I'm curious, when you hear geopolitical risk,
Mm.
what pops into your head?
Honestly, kind of chaos,
Uh-huh, yeah.
Like, I picture conflicts breaking out, trade wars making everything unstable, and just this, overall feeling of uncertainty about the future.
Yeah.
It's like the world's a giant Jenga tower, and somebody just yanked out a crucial block.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And it sounds like this research is saying that one of the outcomes, one of the things that happens when we pull out that block is an increase in carbon emissions.
Right.
Were you surprised by that at all?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, we know that things like war and political instability can cause environmental damage. That's kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
But this research is saying there's this deeper link between geopolitical risk and long-term climate change.
Okay, so walk me through that. How does, a conflict somewhere lead to higher carbon emissions everywhere?
So they found a few key things.
Okay.
First, when geopolitical tensions are high, countries don't really want to work together.
Makes sense.
So it's harder to get those big international agreements on climate,
Yeah.
or even if we have agreements, they might get put on hold.
Right.
Think about what's happened with the whole Russia-Ukraine thing.
Mhm.
It's definitely messed with global decarbonization goals.
Totally. We see countries in Europe having to rely more on fossil fuels again.
Yeah.
Even reopening those old coal power stations. It's a step backwards, for sure.
Exactly. And that actually leads to the second thing the research found: investment shifts. When things feel risky globally, investors get nervous, they pull back from long-term stuff,
Yeah.
especially things like renewable energy, because it seems less stable.
Yeah.
So instead of putting money into innovation, they're sticking with the old, often more polluting ways of doing things.
It's like when the stock market crashes and everyone panics and puts their money in gold, even though gold just sits there.
Yeah. People want that sense of security, even if it means missing out on potential gains.
For sure. Okay, so we've got lack of cooperation, we've got investment shifts. What's the third thing?
Right. So the third thing is they call it policy paralysis. Basically, when a government's dealing with a big, scary threat, like a conflict, the environment kind of gets pushed to the side.
It's not seen as urgent.
Right. It gets lost in the political back and forth, and the whole urgency of climate change just fades away.
So it's like this vicious cycle, right? Tensions make it harder to deal with climate change. Then climate change itself makes things more unstable, more scarce, which then fuels more tension.
Exactly. And what's interesting here is it's not just like the bad guys polluting more when there's conflict. It's more like this global system where everyone has a harder time addressing climate change effectively.
Because of the tension.
Right, exactly.
That's a really important point. It's not about blaming specific countries. It's about this bigger picture.
Yeah, the systemic stuff.
Okay, but how does this all connect to public health? I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that part.
So this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They found that higher geopolitical risk, when it's combined with increased carbon emissions, actually leads to worse public health. It's not just that each of those things is bad on its own. It's that together they create this kind of double whammy.
Oh, okay. So it's like they work together to make things even worse.
Exactly.
Can you give me a real world example?
Sure. The study focused on two main things. PM 2.5, which is basically all the tiny particles in the air.
Yeah.
And then just straight up life expectancy.
I think we all get why life expectancy matters. But maybe just a quick reminder on PM 2.5. What is that exactly, and why is it so bad?
So basically, think of it like microscopic dust. So small it can get way down into your lungs, even your bloodstream.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's linked to all kinds of breathing problems, heart problems.
Right.
It's already a huge issue globally. And this research is saying that geopolitical tensions could be making it even worse.
That's scary. I mean, we all know air pollution is bad, but I never thought about how something like a conflict on the other side of the world could be affecting the air I'm breathing right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the key takeaways here. They found that increased geopolitical risk, along with those higher carbon emissions, is linked to more of this PM 2.5 stuff and shorter lifespans.
Wow.
So it's not just about immediate casualties in a war zone. It's about how global instability can impact the air quality and how long people live, even thousands of miles away.
That's a sobering thought. But to be fair, they didn't just look at geopolitical risk, right? There were other factors they considered.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They looked at a whole range of things that can influence both emissions and public health.
Like what?
Well, one of the interesting ones was foreign direct investment, or FDI.
Remind me, what's FDI again?
So basically, it's when companies from one country invest in businesses in another country.
Right.
And the research suggests that FDI can actually be a good thing. It can bring cleaner technologies and promote economic growth.
Okay.
And that growth then leads to better environmental rules. It's kind of like a win-win.
It's like sharing the secrets to a cleaner future, right? Instead of every country having to figure it out on their own.
Exactly. They also looked at financial development.
Uh-huh.
Basically, how well-developed a country's financial system is.
Okay.
Turns out, countries with more advanced financial systems are better at investing in and implementing technologies to reduce emissions.
So it's not just about having money, it's about having the right systems to use that money effectively.
Exactly. And of course, they looked at things like income levels, population size, how open a country is to trade.
Which all play a part.
Yeah, all those things are connected to the environment and public health.
So basically, they wanted to make sure that the link between geopolitical risk and all these negative outcomes wasn't just a coincidence.
Right. Exactly.
That it wasn't just connected to something else entirely.
Yeah. Even after taking all those other things into account, the link between geopolitical risk and the negative stuff was still there.
So what does this all mean for us, for regular people who don't have any control over global politics and stuff?
It's a good question, right? It's easy to feel powerless when you think about these massive global issues.
Yeah.
But I think this research reminds us that even our individual actions matter.
Oh, okay.
It's not about getting lost in despair. It's about understanding how everything's connected and then figuring out what we can do together and as individuals to build a more sustainable and peaceful world.
Love that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we need to advocate for policies that support both global security and environmental sustainability. It's not one or the other. We need both to create a good future for everyone. And we can do this through our choices, our votes, and how we participate in our communities.
That makes sense. We can't just sit back and wait for governments to figure it all out.
No.
We all have a part to play in making things better. But before we get into potential solutions, let's just pause for a second and think about what we've learned so far. What are the key takeaways here for our listeners?
I think the biggest one is just how connected everything is.
Uh-huh.
What seems like some far-off conflicts or political thing can actually have a real impact on our environment and our health.
Yeah.
Even if we're miles away.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this global ecosystem, and what we do has ripple effects, good and bad.
Exactly.
But like you said, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things we can do to lessen these risks and create a more sustainable and peaceful world.
Right.
And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it. It's easy to get stuck on all the negative stuff when we talk about these big global issues.
Yeah, for sure.
But the researchers did highlight some positive things, too. Things that can help counterbalance those negative impacts of geopolitical risk.
Oh, that's good. Like a little bit of hope.
Exactly. It's not all doom and gloom.
So tell me more about these counterbalancing things. What are they?
Well, we already talked about foreign direct investment, FDI, and financial development, but they're really important. So it's worth repeating that these can be powerful tools for good.
Okay.
For both economic growth and environmental sustainability.
Gotcha.
When done right, FDI can bring cleaner technologies and better practices to developing countries.
Yeah.
Helping them skip over those dirtier stages of development that a lot of countries go through.
It's like sharing the cheat codes for a more sustainable future.
Right. Instead of every country having to figure it out on their own,
yes,
they can learn from others who've already been there.
Okay. I like that.
And a well-developed financial system can provide the money needed to invest in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and all those other climate-friendly things.
So it's like creating a money system that prioritizes sustainability, not just making a quick buck.
Exactly.
So it sounds like economic development and environmental sustainability don't have to be enemies.
Right.
They can actually work together.
Yeah, they can actually reinforce each other in a positive cycle.
I like the sound of that. And that brings us back to public health. We talked about how geopolitical risk, combined with carbon emissions, can negatively impact things like air quality and life expectancy.
Right.
But are there things we can do to combat those negative effects, to kind of push things back in favor of public health?
Absolutely. The research highlighted the importance of policies that promote both global security and environmental sustainability.
Okay.
It's not an either-or situation. We need both to make sure everyone has a healthy and prosperous future.
It's like a holistic approach to well-being.
Yeah, recognizing that peace and a healthy planet go hand in hand.
Okay, so let's get down to specifics. What would those policies actually look like? What are some examples of things that governments and international organizations could be doing to address both security and sustainability?
Well, first off, we need strong international agreements and collaboration on climate change mitigation, even when things are tense geopolitically.
Right.
The Paris Agreement is a good example, but we need to go further.
Okay.
We need to make sure those agreements are binding and enforceable.
So there are consequences if a country doesn't follow through.
Exactly. It's not enough to just have good intentions.
Yeah.
We need to hold each other accountable for meeting those goals.
It's like setting a team goal, but then not caring if someone slacks off.
Exactly. You need that accountability.
To keep everyone on track.
Right. We also need to invest in things that reduce geopolitical risk in the first place,
Okay.
like conflict resolution and diplomacy.
So working to solve conflicts rather than just reacting to them after they happen?
Exactly. Investing in peace building, promoting dialogue between people who don't get along,
Yeah.
and addressing those root causes of conflict, like poverty and inequality.
That makes sense. Addressing those issues could prevent conflicts from happening in the first place.
You got it. And we can't forget about what individuals can do.
Right.
We can all make choices in our daily life that support sustainability.
Like what kinds of things?
Things like driving less walking and biking, more opting for plant-based meals,
Yes.
supporting businesses that care about the environment, investing in renewable energy, things like that.
It's about making choices that show our commitment to a more sustainable and just world.
Exactly. And it's about speaking up, advocating for change.
Okay.
Talk to your friends and family about these things. Support organizations that are making a difference. Hold your elected officials accountable.
Yeah, make them listen to us.
Right. Individual actions are important,
Uh-huh.
but they're even more powerful when we all act together.
Yeah. It's like creating a movement.
Exactly. It's about getting enough people involved to really make a difference.
And remind me why this is all important.
Because if this research teaches us anything, it's that we have a responsibility to create a world that is both peaceful and sustainable.
It's like we're all in this together, right? What happens in one part of the world affects us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that this research makes us rethink how we see risk.
In what way?
We tend to put things in separate categories, right? Economic risks over here, environmental risks over there.
Yeah.
But this research shows us that those neat little boxes don't really exist.
It's all connected.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to see the bigger picture. Because what seems like a solution in one area could actually create problems in another.
If we're not careful.
Right.
So instead of being overwhelmed by all the complexity, we need to focus on finding those areas where we can make the biggest difference. For example, investing in renewable energy not only cuts carbon emissions, but it also creates jobs, boosts the economy, and makes us less reliant on those volatile fossil fuel markets.
Right. Which can then reduce geopolitical tension.
Exactly. It's a win-win-win.
And promoting peace and stability creates a better environment for working together on climate change and other environmental challenges.
It seems like the main takeaway here is that we need to start thinking about these challenges in a more integrated way.
Yeah.
Instead of getting stuck in our own little silos, we need to look for solutions that address multiple problems at the same time.
Exactly. But that takes a change in mindset.
Not just for policymakers, but for everyone.
Right. We need to start seeing ourselves as global citizens and realize that our choices and actions have effects beyond our own communities and countries.
Global citizens.
I like that.
It implies a shared responsibility.
Yeah, a sense of interconnectedness.
But how do we go from awareness to action? How do we actually make that leap?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, but I think it starts with education and awareness.
Okay.
The more we understand these complex connections, the better we'll be at making informed choices and pushing for policies that support both peace and sustainability.
And it's not just about what individuals do right. We also need systemic change. We need to hold our leaders accountable for making decisions that prioritize the well-being of everyone and the planet.
Absolutely. We need leaders who are willing to think long-term and consider the effects of their decisions on future generations.
Leaders who get it.
Yeah. Leaders who understand that a healthy planet is crucial for a prosperous and secure future for all.
That's something we can all agree on, I think, no matter what your political beliefs are.
Absolutely.
We need leaders who are willing to take a long-term, holistic view.
Yeah.
Leaders who understand that the well-being of people is fundamentally linked to the health of our planet.
Well said. It's about moving away from that us versus them thinking and working together, realizing that we're all in this together.
Yeah. We all share the same planet.
Right. And our future depends on our ability to work together to create a peaceful, just, and sustainable world.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
Glad you think so.
And I'm really grateful for all your insights. I feel like I've learned so much. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about individual actions having ripple effects.
Sure.
Can you say more about that? What are some specific things our listeners can do in their own lives to make a difference?
Every choice we make, every action we take sends a signal.
Okay.
It's about being mindful of those signals and making sure our actions match our values.
So it's not just about what we do, but also about what our choices say.
Exactly.
Can you give us some examples of what that looks like in everyday life?
Sure. It could be as simple as walking or biking instead of driving.
Okay.
Or choosing a plant-based meal instead of meat.
Yeah.
Supporting businesses that prioritize sustainability or investing in renewable energy.
It's about making choices that reflect our commitment to a better world.
Exactly. It's about putting our values into action.
Then it's also about speaking up, using our voices to advocate for change.
Yes. Talk to your friends and family, support organizations working to make things better, and hold your elected officials accountable.
Make sure they're working for us.
Exactly. Individual actions are great, but they're even more impactful when we work together.
Yeah. It's about creating a movement for change.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about getting enough people on board to create a more just and sustainable world. And it's important to remember, we're not alone in this.
Right.
There are people all over the world fighting for the same things.
It's encouraging to know that we're part of something bigger.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect place to stop.
I agree. This deep dive has been so enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this exploration of geopolitical risk, climate change, and public health. We hope this deep dive has helped you understand how everything's connected and inspired you to think differently about the challenges and opportunities we all face.
Definitely.
Remember, the world is interconnected in ways we're only beginning to understand, and our actions, big or small, have the power to shape the future.
That's right.
So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
This research really makes you think differently about risk, doesn't it? We always try to put things in their own separate categories.
Yeah, totally.
Economic risks over here, environmental risk over there. But it turns out it doesn't really work like that.
It's all connected.
Exactly. And that's why understanding those connections is so important, because what might seem like a good solution in one area could actually cause problems somewhere else.
If you're not looking at the whole picture.
Right.
So let's talk solutions. Where do we even start with all of this? It feels huge.
Yeah. It's definitely complex, but I don't think there's one simple answer.
Okay.
It's more about changing how we think about these problems.
So what does that look like? How do we change how we think?
Well, for one, we have to realize that we're all part of this big interconnected system, and everything we do has an impact.
Yeah.
It's about moving away from that me versus them idea and being more collaborative, more like we're all in this together.
More like we're all part of one big team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And realizing that there's no easy fix.
Hmm.
We need solutions from the top down and the bottom up.
Okay.
Individual actions and big systemic changes. Governments need to make policies that put sustainability first, but we also need people to make good choices in their everyday lives.
It's not about waiting for someone else to fix it.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility and speaking up for change.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we all have a part to play no matter how small list. And all those small actions, when a lot of people do them, can add up to something big.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I feel like I understand so much more about how all these different issues are connected, but it also gives you a lot to think about.
That's good. It means we've gotten you thinking.
Definitely. And I think one of the biggest questions we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of future do we want?
That's the question, isn't it? Because we're creating the future with every choice we make.
It's not about just waiting to see what happens.
No.
It's about actively building the future we want, and that starts with us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been a really fascinating and thought-provoking deep dive.
It was great talking with you.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us as we explore geopolitical risk, climate change, and public health.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope this deep dive gave you some new insights and inspired you to think differently about the challenges and opportunities we face as a global community. The world is interconnected in ways we're only beginning to understand, and everything we do matters. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.